While out hunting, a terrifying thing happened to the boy. He saw a massive lion suddenly appear right in front of him, and sensing danger, he quickly shielded his younger brother behind him. Facing such a formidable beast, he knew that even if he fired, there was no way to kill it with a single shot. Sergei did something unexpected. In a critical moment, he put down his weapon, trying to show the Lion King that he meant no harm. Surprisingly, the lion's fierce expression slowly began to soften. But suddenly, a gunshot shattered the fragile piece. The one who fired was Sergei's father, Nikolai. But Nikolai had miscalculated. The lion roared and lunged at Sergei, its sharp teeth piercing through his body. Nikolai fired multiple shots in a desperate attempt to stop it, but it was no use. The lion carried Sergei away, and he knew his son had no chance of survival. But fate quietly turned its gears at that moment. The lion's blood accidentally seeped into Sergei's wound, and as if a mysterious gate had opened, their genes reacted in a strange way. The lion seemed to sense it too, dropped the boy, and walked away. Miraculously, Sergei survived. Yet Nikolai showed no joy at his son's return from death. As a legendary mob figure, he couldn't tolerate Sergei's moment of weakness. He wanted his son to have the bloodthirsty instincts of a wolf and warned him about the brutal law of the jungle, urging him to one day take over the family business. This harsh upbringing left Sergei torn and in pain, but he dared not defy his ruthless father. However, when he saw the lion's stuffed body on display, he could no longer suppress his inner rage. Sergei locked himself in his room, swearing he would never become a cold-blooded monster like his father. Not long ago, his mother had taken her own life after years of domestic abuse. Fueled by anger and disappointment in his family, he decided to leave forever. Before he left, he pulled out a mysterious card that seemed to hold deep meaning for him. But as he carefully climbed onto the rooftop, the tiles beneath his feet suddenly cracked. He thought he would crash hard to the ground, but instead he landed lightly. Sergei couldn't believe what had just happened, but there was no time to think. He began a long journey to his mother's hometown, a vast grassland in the Russian Far East. While he was taking in the breathtaking beauty of nature, a terrifying noise suddenly erupted. Sergei looked back in horror and saw a massive herd of wild buffalo thundering toward him from the horizon. Faced with such a dense stampede, even a mighty lion would retreat, and with no place to hide in the open field, he could only cover his ears and brace for the worst. But strangely, the buffalo didn't trample him. Instead, they veered off and ran past him on both sides. Then he realized the lead buffalo was shielding him with its body. Only after the entire herd had passed did the Buffalo King finally walk away. That was when Sergei discovered not only could he communicate with animals, but his physical abilities were beyond human. With just a bit of force, he could hurl a spear over 100 meters. His speed rivaled that of a cheetah. He could catch a running deer in an instant. His explosive power is astonishing. Just a slight push from his toes propels him into the air. Even his hearing had evolved. He could distinguish the number of water droplets in a canyon stream. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the valley. He quickly climbed a towering tree and spotted two poachers nearly a kilometer away. Sergei rushed over to stop them, but he was too late. Seeing the dozens of buffalo lying dead on the ground, a wave of fury surged through him. But before he could act, the poachers came straight to him, threatening him to leave immediately. Those words triggered the beast lurking inside Sergei. He picked up a knife from the ground and pounced like a wild animal. Under his iron fists, the two poachers had no chance to fight back. Looking at another group of poachers not far away, then down at the fallen buffalo, Sergei made a silent vow. He would get justice for these animals. 16 years flew by, and Sergei had become a legendary assassin. As a top villain under the Marvel banner, his name struck fear across the underworld. Once someone's name appeared on Kraven's list, there was no escaping the hunt. To get close to his next target, he even disguised himself as a prisoner to sneak into jail. But as soon as he entered the cell, he was stunned. It was obvious his cellmate was also a dangerous man. To avoid unnecessary conflict, Kraven offered a wager. He claimed he would be out in 3 days, and if he wasn't, his cellmate could do whatever he wanted to him. His cellmate was puzzled but gave a knowing smile. During the next day's yard time, two clueless thugs approached, claiming everything in this place belonged to their boss, Semyon, and said they were going to teach the new guy a lesson. But they would soon pay the price for their ignorance. Kraven, with just a slight effort, effortlessly lifted both of them off the ground. Fortunately, the guards showed up just in time to stop a tragedy from unfolding. Afterward, Kraven was brought to the Kingpin's room, but he wasn't worried at all. He knew exactly who the man was because this was the very reason he came here. As soon as they let their guard down, Craven launched his attack. Before the two bodyguards could react, they were already on the ground. Semyon sensed the danger, but by then, it was already too late. The commotion drew in the prison guards, but Craven grabbed him and hurled him off the upper level. He climbed the wall like a lizard, then used brute force to tear open an escape route, triggering a deafening prison alarm, but Craven was simply too fast. Any weapon was useless in his presence, and within just 1 minute, he had broken out of the prison. Yet what awaited him was an unprecedented danger. A massive storm swallowed him whole, and in the blinding blizzard, Craven quickly lost his sense of direction. Just then, he suddenly sensed a murderous presence. A tundra wolf emerged before him, but as Craven used his telepathy, the wolf instantly became docile, and under its guidance, he successfully reunited with his extraction team. He then wiped away the tattoos on his body. By the time the military arrived, all they found was a corpse, mauled beyond recognition by wolves. Having completed his mission, Craven returned to the grasslands, only to find a group of poachers slaughtering buffalo. He waited patiently along their convoy's path. These poachers thought they could take Craven down easily, but they had clearly overestimated themselves. Craven, like a raging beast, wiped out an entire truckload of them in just a few seconds. The leader on the pickup truck panicked and, realizing the situation was out of control, fled the scene. But Craven wasn't about to let him go. He quietly memorized the license plate number. The fleeing leader had just returned to report to his boss, when suddenly a crossbow bolt aimed right at his head. Craven crossed his name off the list and even closed the door behind him on his way out. Guided by scent, he appeared before a woman and took out a card he had treasured for years. At that moment, Calypso realized that Craven was the same little boy from long ago. Back then, when Craven was taken by the lion, Calypso and her family were also traveling nearby. The card she held had been given to her by her grandmother before the trip, after a fortune reading, claiming it would protect her from danger. Her grandmother also passed down a mysterious elixir that had been in the family for generations. Perhaps led by fate, Calypso encountered the lion with the boy in its mouth. The beast didn't harm the child, but when it saw Calypso, there was even a trace of pleading in its eyes. Calypso fed Craven the mysterious elixir, and before leaving, she handed him the card, hoping it would bring him good fortune. Though doctors did everything they could, Craven's injuries were too severe, and he was declared dead. But just as the doctors were about to disconnect the machines, he miraculously came back to life. To unravel the mystery in his heart, he searched tirelessly for 16 years, until he finally sensed Calypso's presence. By now, Calypso had become a renowned lawyer in London, but her mentor had recently been killed while handling a case. Craven told her that he had already avenged her. The killer was Semyon, the one from the prison. Calypso, unsure whether to believe him, returned home and confirmed that Semyon had indeed died behind bars. She found Craven again, and while she agreed the man deserved it, she couldn't accept Craven's methods, especially knowing he did it just to repay a favor. But neither of them knew that news of Semyon's death had already reached Rhino's ears. Once a small-time thug under Craven's father, Rhino was now growing dangerously ambitious. To expand his influence, he arranged a meeting with Semyon's former right-hand man, Omer, hoping he'd come work for him. But this refined and well-mannered man didn't seem to match the terrifying nickname Rhino. To show his power, he unplugged a hose connected to his backpack. His arm began to change. Omer's men panicked and opened fire, dropping Rhino to the ground. But he didn't die. He casually brushed off the dust and stood back up. He unbuttoned his shirt, dug bullets out of his hardened skin, and once he reconnected the hose, his flesh returned to normal. Faced with this terrifying monster, Omer had no choice but to follow him. Omer arranged a meeting with Craven's father, Nikolai. Nikolai expressed regret over the death of their boss and promised to offer them shelter. In truth, Nikolai also wanted to bring them under his command, but he sensed something was off after only a few words. Killers sent by Rhino suddenly launched an ambush. Fortunately, Nikolai had prepared for such an attack, but his younger son Dmitri was so frightened he hid, which deeply disappointed Nikolai. He expected Dmitri to act like a man and show some backbone, not cower like a turtle in the face of danger. News of the failed assassination quickly reached Rhino. Though furious, he wasn't surprised. After all, Nikolai was no ordinary man. At the same time, his men brought him a USB drive containing footage of Craven's prison break. Learning that the legendary hunter was actually Nikolai's son left Rhino stunned. If the two reconciled, it would surely unleash a bloodbath. Rhino sent a bizarre assassin, a man with an extraordinary ability. Anyone who locked eyes with him would be instantly hypnotized without fail. Meanwhile, Craven had no idea danger was closing in. Wanting to surprise his brother on his birthday, he climbed a skyscraper barehanded, skillfully dodging all of his father's surveillance and finally reunited with Dmitri. It turned out that on the night Craven ran away from home, Dmitri had begged to go with him. But Craven refused. Over the years, Dmitri had often suffered his father's scolding, and Craven couldn't help but feel guilty. Although his father constantly crushed Dmitri's self-esteem, deep down, the boy still longed for his approval. But Craven saw through Nikolai long ago. He urged his brother to stay far away from the man who was nothing more than a heartless villain. Just as he was about to explain more, their father suddenly showed up. Not wanting to ruin his brother's birthday, Craven forced a smile. After the party, he spent the night alone in a park. The next morning, as he prepared to say goodbye, he found the room ransacked and his brother missing. All that remained was a patch of blood on the bedsheet. He immediately ran to the balcony and caught sight of his brother being shoved into a car. Without hesitation, Craven jumped down. The height was nothing for him, but he was still a step too late. The kidnappers had already vanished down the road. Craven refused to give up. He unleashed beast-like speed and sprinted after them, and as the gap between them narrowed, his muscles surged with power. He rammed into the car like a charging bull, then leapt onto it in one powerful motion. He tried to smash the window and rescue his brother, but the car was moving too fast and Craven was thrown off while dodging. The kidnappers took Dmitri to a remote dock, but Craven wasn't far behind. Just before the helicopter took off, he wrapped a net rope around the frame, planted his feet firmly, and used brute strength to hold it down. When the assassin pulled out his weapon, Craven tied the rope, dodged the bullets, grabbed a steel pipe, and then leapt into the air. The gunner didn't even have time to react before being taken down. The helicopter finally broke free, and Craven, in a last-ditch effort, grabbed on. Dragged hundreds of meters across the sea, he was eventually thrown off by a buoy and could only watch as his brother was taken away. Craven turned to Calypso for help, hoping her resources could uncover the kidnappers' hideout. Though she agreed, it would take time, so Craven sought out his father, only to find that Nikolai already knew what had happened. The kidnappers had sent a severed finger as proof, demanding $20 million in ransom. Though the money meant little to Nikolai, as the most feared mob boss in New York, surrendering would mean his reputation was finished. And even if the ransom was paid, he believed they wouldn't release the hostage anyway. After weighing his options, Nikolai decided to ignore the demand. Craven's last hope shattered. Seeing his father choose to abandon Dmitri, Craven knew he had to face the enemy alone and rescue his brother with his own hands. Luckily, Calypso's side had a breakthrough. A friend had located the base, but the moment she left, that friend ran into the strange assassin. It turned out her friend had already been bought off, but what he didn't expect was that the other side utterly despised betrayal. The kidnapper's base was hidden on a sheer cliff, but that posed no challenge to Craven. He clung to the rock face like a lizard and quickly infiltrated the stronghold. A guard barely stepped into view before a flying blade pierced his throat. Craven moved like a phantom among the guards, his footsteps so light they didn't make a single sound. Even the most alert sentries couldn't detect the looming danger. But even the greatest hunter can slip up. His presence eventually triggered the alarm. Still, the enemies had overestimated their strength. Gunfire ceased in seconds. Omer, leading the group, tried to fight back but was sent flying by Craven's charge. Just as Craven was about to interrogate him about his brother's whereabouts, he sensed danger. A rocket came flying in. There was no time to dodge. Craven and Omer were blasted off the cliff together. The explosion triggered a landslide. To preserve the lead he had, Craven used his body to shield Omer from the falling debris. As the city wall was blown apart once more, Craven couldn't escape in time and was completely buried. Afterward, the assassin was rummaging through Craven's body, preparing to take a photo to send to his boss, but he never expected Craven to suddenly appear behind him. Before the two killers could react, Craven had already taken them down. Meanwhile, Dmitri was brought before Rhino, who unexpectedly chose not to hurt him. Instead, Rhino showed a rare flash of compassion. He believed that Dmitri, long neglected by his father, shared a past similar to his own. To gain Dmitri's trust, Rhino revealed his secret. He had undergone extreme biological experiments, which turned him into what he is now. Though granted immense strength, he constantly suffered excruciating pain. Despite hating his monstrous form, he understood one truth: only the strong are respected. He hoped Dmitri would agree to undergo the same transformation and use his power to take over Nikolai's criminal empire. But just then, his men reported an intruder, and everyone drew their weapons. Rhino hadn't expected Craven to arrive so quickly, but when the elevator doors opened, it wasn't Craven, it was the foreigner. The moment he removed his glasses, everyone was pulled into a hallucination. He glided down the corridor like a phantom and appeared directly before Dmitri. The foreigner warned Rhino not to kill Dmitri before capturing Craven, as he had discovered Craven had no weaknesses, except for his brother. He then pulled a strange plant from his pocket, a rare species from Siberia, the same one Craven used to create his poisoned arrows. Find where it grows, and they could track down Craven. Meanwhile, fearing for Calypso's safety, Craven took her to his hideout in Siberia. The place was filled with research equipment and rare herbs. It turned out Craven had been studying plants in hopes of recreating the ancient remedy that once saved him. But Calypso didn't know the recipe. It had been lost with her grandmother. At the same time, the foreigner and Rhino arrived with a terrifying new poison. Once injected, it awakened a person's deepest fears, caused organ failure, and ultimately killed them inside a nightmare. But soon they ran into unexpected trouble. Something dangerous lurked in the forest. A cheetah burst out from the trees, only to vanish again just as quickly. In the chaos, Dimitri escaped into the woods. Rhino sent a team to search for him, unaware they were walking into Craven's trap. The hunt had begun. In the jungle, Craven moved like a ghost. Before the assassins even had a chance to fire, they were already lying dead on the ground. The remaining men panicked, but it was already too late to run. Rhino realized his men were doomed and ordered a helicopter to bomb the area. But Craven was too fast. He easily dodged the explosives. Just as he was returning, however, he was struck by a poisoned arrow. His vision blurred, and his body began to sway. Suddenly, spiders surrounded him. Craven had fallen into a nightmare. The foreigner's voice echoed in his mind, trying to break his will. Craven couldn't tell illusion from reality. He tried to fight back, but his limbs were sluggish. When he finally struck, he hit nothing but wooden posts. His defenses crumbled, and just as the foreigner moved in for the kill, an arrow pierced his forehead. Calypso had arrived just in time. Seeing Craven on the brink of death, she used the mysterious elixir again, bringing him back to his senses. Meanwhile, Rhino received updates from his men and assumed Craven was dead. He prepared to return to base with Dimitri, but then a terrifying sight caught his eye. A massive stampede of buffalo. Rhino knew no one could survive such an onslaught. He quietly detached the hose on his back, and his body began to harden in seconds. Human cars were as fragile as paper in the face of the raging buffalo. Craven caught up quickly. Rhino climbed atop a car, and Craven attacked first, launching him several meters with a flying kick. As the car spun out of control, Rhino didn't even try to dodge, and the force hurled Craven far away. Rhino lifted the car again. Craven closed the distance using agility, weaving through attacks, and got face to face with his enemy. But no matter how hard he struck, it didn't hurt Rhino. Instead, Craven was sent flying dozens of meters. Craven was dazed from the blow, and before he could regain his footing, Rhino launched a ferocious attack, leaving Craven no chance to fight back. With a brutal charge, Rhino sent both Craven and the truck flying through the air. Craven was pinned beneath it as Rhino smirked in victory. But Craven rose again, only to be captured once more. Against overwhelming strength, he stood no chance. As he was about to lose consciousness, he noticed Rhino's weakness. He summoned every ounce of strength and drove a metal rod into Rhino's weak spot. Rhino roared in pain and released him, but that only enraged the bee. Craven quickly pulled out a steel cable and, with his agile reflexes, wrapped it tightly around Rhino. He hurled the other end skyward, tying it to a charging buffalo. After being trampled by the massive herd of buffalo, Rhino was barely clinging to life, his arrogance completely crushed. But things were far from over. Craven tracked down his father, only to discover that it was him who had sent the prison break footage to Rhino. When pressed, Nikolai didn't deny it. He had known all along that the mysterious hunter was his own son, so he secretly reached out to Rhino, using Craven's bond with his brother as bait, hoping to eliminate this threat through someone else's hands. Though Craven was deeply disappointed, he couldn't bring himself to kill his own father. But just as he walked away, a bear's roar echoed from the jungle. Nikolai grabbed his rifle in a panic, only to find there were no bullets inside. At the same moment Craven loosened his grip, the bear launched its attack. A year later, Craven attended his brother's birthday, only to find that the once weak boy had now fully taken over their father's business, something that left Craven stunned. He didn't want his brother to become the next Nikolai. After the party, he tried to talk to him, but what he saw next shook him to his core. It turned out Dimitri had secretly joined the doctor's experiment long ago. Craven couldn't believe it. The timid little brother he once knew had orchestrated everything in secret. Even Craven himself had been nothing more than a pawn on Dimitri's chessboard, and this cunning chameleon was about to unleash a catastrophe unlike anything the world had ever seen.